In the neighborhood of Belmont Estates, every lawn was meticulously maintained, each house a symbol of wealth and authority. Life in the community was a well-rehearsed performance, with no surprises, no interruptions, no gaps. My life, too, seemed perfectly crafted: an ideal home, a luxury car, and a wife who could grace the cover of any high society magazine. Every morning followed a predictable script. I woke up at 6, entered the kitchen, and then headed to the gym, just as my wife Lillian had instructed. Breakfast was a precise ritual we never deviated from. The pace never broke. Everything appeared the same, as always. I sat at the kitchen island, a hot cup of black coffee in hand, its rich aroma mingling with subtle vanilla flavors. The counters gleamed under soft lighting, reflecting the candle Lillian always lit in the mornings. Every item in its place made the kitchen feel more like a showroom than a home, something to be admired but never truly lived in. Lillian moved with grace and ease, her beautiful chocolate-brown hair catching the golden morning light. She presented me with a platter of freshly cut fruit and Greek yogurt, each movement deliberate, rehearsed 1,000 times. "I'll be working late tonight," she said casually, pouring herself a cup of green tea. I looked up and adjusted my tie. "Dinner with a client?" Her lips curled into a gentle smile, the kind practiced in the mirror to appear flawless, well-groomed, and empty. "Yes," she answered simply. I nodded, sipping my coffee and watching her. For years, I had convinced myself that this life we had built was real, that this was happiness. But lately, that certainty had begun to waver. At first, it was a feeling, something small, a whisper in the back of my mind. Her phone was always by her side. She always seemed just a bit too calm, too cautious. Our conversations had become rehearsed, like lines read aloud by actors. I told myself I was overanalyzing it, but as I sat there, looking at the woman I had built my life with, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. No major fights, no accusations, no obvious red flags, just little things. The faint scent of an unfamiliar cologne on her clothes, the way she always seemed to be checking the time, and the way she kissed me goodbye when she thought I wasn't looking. Maybe it was stress, or maybe it was something else. I drained my coffee, picked up my briefcase, and headed for the door. Lillian stood at the entryway, her silk robe draped elegantly over her shoulders. "Don't work too hard," she said, pressing a soft kiss to my cheek. "I'll try," I whispered as I pulled out of the driveway. The crisp morning air filled my lungs as the streets of Belmont Estates stretched before me, each home a perfect replica of the last. On the surface, success looked like a dream, but dreams change when you least expect it. They become nightmares. By midday, the fallout had begun. Carter Enterprises had lost millions, and Lillian's name was trending for hours. Investors were pulling out faster than they could recover, and the internet had labeled her a gold digger, a cheater, a fraud. After the scandal broke, her law firm issued a notice of suspension, pending further investigation. Just when I thought the day couldn't get any worse, my lawyer, Rich Hayes Damon, called me with a chuckle in his voice. "You're going to love this," he said. I leaned back in my chair, listening. "The SEC is investigating that little $200,000 withdrawal," he continued. "And if they find anything illegal, and based on the shady offshore accounts your in-laws have been using, they most certainly will. Joseph Carter is facing some serious consequences." I grinned broadly. "And Lillian just got served," Richard added. I hummed in satisfaction. She just begged my assistant to cancel it, and then started crying. I let out a brief chuckle. She truly believed she could get away with it. And she still believes she can. "Can I assume she's going to make one last attempt?" I asked. I knew what he meant. Lillian wasn't stupid. She was cunning, manipulative, and if there was even the slightest chance of regaining power, she would take it. That evening, as I poured myself a glass of whiskey, I heard frantic knocking on my front door. I opened it slowly, savoring the moment. I already knew who it was. Lillian Carter stood there, no longer the polished, self-assured woman I once knew. Her makeup was smeared, her hair unkempt, and her expensive coat crumpled from what I could only assume had been a very bad day. "Damon," she murmured. "Please, let's talk." I took a slow sip of my drink, leaning against the door frame. "Everything is falling apart," she said. "My father's losing everything, and my job." I cocked my head, watching her. "You didn't plan for this to happen, did you?" Her face crumpled. I finished for her, my tone dripping with amusement. "You didn't plan on getting caught." Her eyes widened. "Damon, please," she pleaded. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass. "Oh, Lillian." I stepped back into the house. Please, we can fix this. You can fix this. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, I shut the door in her face. For the first time in our marriage, I was the one in control. I stood there with my hand still on the doorknob, listening to her muffled breathing. But she didn't knock again. She didn't scream or plead like I expected. Instead, she turned and walked away, the only sound being the soft click of her heels as she disappeared into the night. I took a deep breath and moved away from the door, feeling an unexpected sense of relief. The illusion of our marriage, the belief that Lillian was my future, it was all gone. That night, I realized something I never really knew about her. Not the way a husband should know his wife. And now I never would. I took another sip of whiskey, but it burned in my throat. I put the glass down, turned away from the door, and left the past exactly where it belonged, outside. The battle wasn't over. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a call from Joseph Carter. I ignored it. Then Margaret called. Then Daniel. I smirked, watching their increasingly frantic attempts to reach me. Last night was only the beginning. Carter Enterprises was crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. Stocks plummeted. Investors severed ties. Hacked emails, financial discrepancies, and a social media storm. The news outlets were running the story worldwide. The Carter empire was falling apart. Fraud. Infidelity. Betrayal. The headlines were brutal. Lillian Carter exposed. Socialite involved in multi-million-dollar fraud. Luxury to ruin. How Lillian and Carter lost everything in one day. By lunchtime, Richard called again, sounding pleased. They're in full panic mode, he said. Margaret tried to have the articles taken down, but screenshots are everywhere. The SEC is all over those offshore accounts. If they find what I think they will, Joseph Carter won't just lose his business, he'll lose his freedom. I nodded. Joseph had spent decades manipulating markets, bending rules, and buying loyalty. But now his empire was crumbling, and he was powerless to stop it. Lillian filed a petition, Richard continued. She wants to discuss a settlement before the divorce gets ugly. I laughed. She's desperate. She knows she's lost her career, her reputation, everything. She won't walk away without a fight. Richard warned me, Lillian isn't stupid. She's been playing the game for years. If she thinks she has a chance, she'll take it. But she's already lost, I told him. There's nothing to discuss. Decline the meeting.